Kia ora koutou. Markie here. I wanted to shoot a video about Occam's razor, and I thought, why not do it? Give you a little view of the sunset. And there's some fantastic waves as well. It's carrying on those waves. Yeah, there we go. That's where the real doozies are. So that's that spot. So for those of you who watched my last video about the beach cabin, that's kind of where I am as well. So we'll pan round to there. So I've done a bit more work making it safe and stable. That wasn't bad. It's not quite as elegant as my original design, but then it never is. It becomes a bit ramshackle. That's the nature of using driftwood. So I actually want to talk to you about Occam's razor. Okay, it's not a sales video for male grooming products. What do they call them, male grooming products? Associating men with animals that they're grooming. I'm just panning in on that bit of rock at the end there, because that's something where you can see fur seals. You can often see their silhouettes against the rock. Occam's razor. Okay, so Occam's razor is, if you haven't heard of it before, is a philosophical concept, and it's one that everyone gets wrong. So, being Mark the Demystifier, I like to correct these things. So I'm going to talk about where most people get Occam's razor wrong. Just watching the tide as well, because it's getting quite high. I don't want to get cut off the waves again. This is the problem. There's so many kind of amazing things going on with the sun and the sea and stuff like that. It's really easy to interrupt oneself. I'm bad about that the rest of the time. Now in a moment, we've seen a little bit of it. We'll probably get a glimpse of a mini migration of, I think they're sparrows. Somebody told me the starlings, but I don't think they are sparrows that roost on this island. Not that island. There's two islands you can see there, one behind the other. Not either of those islands. Not that island over there, but this island here that looks a little like a head of a dog. They roost on there, and they tend to kind of fly together in little groups, often along the same route, and they roost there. It's quite a nice sight. So we probably will get a little bit of that. If there's only a few of them, you can't see them, but if they're on maps, you can see them. So I might distract myself further in a minute. So Occam's razor. So if you've heard of it, you probably heard the wrong things about it. If you haven't heard about it, I'll explain it. So it comes from a theologian philosopher called William of Occam, and he was around in the early medieval period. And he was called William of Occam is a village. So actually today I believe it's called Occam, not Hokum, but Occam as in oak tree, and that's where he was from. So people used to be named after the places that they come from back in the day. And he came up with this concept, which is about finding explanations and causes. It's about theorising. Okay, so if a phenomenon occurs and we don't know what the cause is, how do we best come up with good, the best likely explanation? Okay. So it's not about kind of hard science where you can actually completely and scientifically identify the explanation. It's about where things are a little bit more fuzzy, such as they are in theology. Okay, so Occam's razor. Now the thing that people always say about Occam's razor, and this is the wrong bit, okay? They say the most simple explanation is most likely to be the correct one. Okay? And that's not what Occam's razor is about. So what Occam's razor is about, so it's called a razor because it's about shaving away false or superfluous assumptions. And think about, this was to do with theology. Okay, so where William of Occam applied this was in kind of concepts that theologians at the time were making about God and the Bible and life, the universe, and everything, creation, and saying things like, so asking questions like, I don't know, if God is almighty, then why is there sin? Okay, and then so what happened? What Occam found, what his beef was, if you like, was that people were kind of making things up to try and explain things that were in the Bible. So the Bible was taken, literally as gospel. So if there's a statement in the Bible and you couldn't quite explain why. So God is almighty. In order to explain things, what people were doing was, literally creating other things to make sense of them. So it's quite hard to, I find it quite hard to come up with an example of this. It's a little bit like, if God is why is God almighty? Well, God is almighty because he has an army of ninja turtles that support him. Okay, so that's ridiculous, but that's the kind of thing that people were doing. They were making stuff up. And what William of Occam did was kind of say, well, hang on a minute, you're justifying this by a whole bunch of assumptions, and then where do the Ninja Turtles come from? Well, the Ninja Turtles are supported by an army of soup dragons that feed them. So what he was saying is basically cut away as many assumptions and things that aren't proven as possible, and stick with what you do know, what is most likely. So the best way, this is where I can give a good example, and it's a very topical example. I might even put this video out with 2 titles, because this part of it will appeal to people that are into the paranormal and ufology and that kind of thing. And I do, those of you new to the channel might not realise that I do cover that quite a bit actually. I've done quite a few videos on that. So for those of you but the thing is, people that, if I put this out as a UFO video, only certain people will look at it. If I put it out as a rock and center philosophy video, only certain people will look at it. So I might be naughty and actually put it out twice. So if you've watched it already, you'll be wise to this. So I don't know if you're aware, the Pentagon have recently released a couple of videos of camera footage from aircraft and from ships, actually, from naval ships, of weird shapes moving around in impossible, what we would say impossible speed and maneuverability, and one kind of appears to kind of disappear into the sea without making a splash. So this has come out, and people are saying, the way that, and the press usually like to sensationalise things, obviously, so they say things like, this is proof that aliens exist, which is absolutely not. No, okay, no, don't get me wrong here, okay, I'm not a skeptic, and I'm not a believer. I have a beautifully open mind about nearly everything. So, but what that is not is proof that aliens exist, because it's based on a whole bunch of assumptions. So what we've seen is a shape, okay? Now this is something that is visible and also showed up on radar, okay? But people jump to conclusions. So first of all, they jump to the conclusion that it's an alien craft. So what they mean by an alien craft is creatures that come from another planet that's not on this Earth, okay? So that is a big assumption, but it's based on a whole bunch of kind of smaller assumptions. So, so the first assumption really is that it's an object. Okay, so yes, it's showing up on radar and it's visible. So first of all, I would say it's a shape. I would say it's a body, is the word that I would probably use. So it might be made of dense gas, it might be made of electromagnetic air, and I don't know, and this is where I don't know enough about what gets picked up on radar and what doesn't. But first of all, don't necessarily even assume that it's an object. That's why I don't like the term UFO, unidentified flying objects. So if you see a light in the sky, you don't know that that's an object. That is a shape, that it's a light. It could be a light that's formed by combustible, burning gases, okay, which is not an object. It might be a reflection. It might be something that's going on, a whole range of explanations, okay? But first of all, to assume that it's an object, that's an assumption in itself. Okay, no, maybe, you could argue that one. People that know a little bit more about the science, maybe say, Markie, you're talking nonsense, it's clearly an object, because it wasn't an object within the shopping mall. But first of all, in most cases, certainly when people see things, let's take the radar out of it, they assume that it's an object, okay? So that's an assumption. The second thing is they assume that it's a craft, because it's moving around and flying and stuff like that, okay? So, that's a huge leap, that it's a craft. It's, because we have, if we see something flying around in the sky at great speed, we think it must be man-made, and it must be some kind of vehicle in which, some kind of life form sits. Huge assumption, okay? So, and then you leap into the fact that they're extraterrestrials. Massive pile of assumption upon assumption upon assumption upon assumption. So William of Occam, bless him, if he was around today, he would say, well, no, let's shake these. He would be saying the same things as me. I think they actually killed him in the end. I'm not sure, I can check that. I think they called him a heretic and killed him, which is what happens to people that think and share their thoughts. So what we're seeing is some kind of shape that moves around that is visible on radar. Okay, there is no evidence to make the leap that it's a craft. And if it is a craft, there's no evidence, or no strong evidence to suggest that there are living creatures in it. And if there are living creatures in it, there is no evidence to suggest that they are from other planets. So it might be, there's all kinds of other theories, and I'm not saying that these theories are any more valid than the alien theories, but there are other theories that there are intelligent hidden species within a hollow Earth is one of them. That's common theory, not my one, but it's common theory. I didn't invent that. And a big one at the moment, a big popular theory, is that some of these, and this explains kind of things like, even things like Bigfoot, because there's a Bigfoot equivalent in nearly every country in the world, even countries where you wouldn't really expect a large, hairy, ape-like creature to be able to kind of exist and survive in the wild. And one of the theories is that they're interdimensional creatures, that they come from another dimension and they kind of are able to kind of move in and out of dimensions. So they could be interdimensional creatures. Okay? But all of these are assumptions. Okay? And none of them, there's no reason to go down any one line of assumption than any other. So all we can say is that it's an object. All we say is it's a shape. It may be an object. It may be a craft. If it is a craft, then it may be manned, it may not be manned. But all of these things are, people don't, stop and think about any of these intermediary stages they jump to. It's something that seems to be flying around in a way that's a craft, an aircraft that we know of from current Earth technology could not do. Therefore, it's aliens from another planet. Massive bunch of assumptions. Okay. Could be right, but just as likely could not be. So, these photographs do not prove extraterrestrial life. They do not prove that extraterrestrials are visiting the Earth. They don't prove anything. It could be advanced military technology. So the most likely explanation, if you did, if you took it if you had to make a choice, okay, and I don't think it's wise when we don't know, but if you had to make a choice, the most likely explanation, and this is according to the Occam's razor, not according to me, okay, but the most likely explanation is that it's advanced military technology, because we know there is such a thing as military technology. We know that military technology, I'm going to be interested by it, ease off. We know that military technology was tested is kept secret. We know that the Pentagon is aware that, let's say we know that world governments and military organisations are aware that people see anomalous flying phenomena. So it would be in their interests to say, if they want to keep this stuff secret, is to say, we've seen this, but we don't know who it is. It's not ours. That's kind of going to be in their interests. So we know that agencies and governments and military forces, they develop technology like to put out misinformation. So these are all known things. So by Occam's razor, based on what but we don't know that there are interdimensional beings. We don't know that there are creatures from other planets, though it's likely. And if there are creatures from other planets, we don't know that they visit the Earth. We don't know how it would be possible at the moment to visit the Earth. There's theories about that, but at the moment, according to what we know, what we do know in terms of science, there's no explanation for how they would get here. And oh wow, isn't that looking great? Isn't that fantastic? So the Occam's razor explanation would have to be something along those lines, because it's based on the fewest number of assumptions. Okay? It doesn't mean that it's right. I'm not even saying necessarily that Occam's razor is good. All I'm saying is people get Occam's razor wrong, and when it comes to things like this, they go overboard with assumptions, which is not a good thing. I don't think. I think people need to learn how to think. Thinking is a skill. It's something that we kind of tend to do by default. But actually, there are thinking skills, and we should be taught them at school. That old adage, we shouldn't be taught what to think, but we should be taught how to think. And Occam's razor is one way of being taught how to think. I think it does. I think it is valid in this example. Occam's razor applies well in this. So Occam's razor is not the simplest explanation. Is usually the right one. I mean, maybe that's true. Maybe the simplest explanation usually is the right one. That packet of biscuits that you had in the top shelf of the cupboard has gone missing. Most likely explanation, your teenage son scoffed them. Least likely explanation, your house was invaded by possums who ate them. Even least likely explanation that they disappeared into another dimension. You have a son, he likes biscuits, you know that he might be prone to taking biscuits and not telling anyone. Again, Occam's razor. So I hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to take some photos because this is looking stunning, isn't it? Thank you for listening to me ramble about Occam's razor. I'm not an expert on Occam's razor, but I know enough about it to know that it's been misused, and I don't like that. So if you like this, or even just for the sake of the views, give us a like, give us a subscribe, join us on Patreon, do all those groovy things. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll be back soon with probably something completely different. Rangimarie.